All right, it is now 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and it is time to get started with the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. My name is Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer. Today, Dion, I believe, has a quick demo to show you, but basically we're here to answer your questions. So if you would, please type any questions you may have into the GoToWebinar control panel. And right now, we are very light on questions. So if you get your questions in now, the chances of them being answered are actually pretty high. So let's get started. Let me take you off mute, Dion. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And I can now see your screen. So take it away.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really enjoy having you on our weekly webinar. And thanks. We didn't have one last week, spring break. I hope everybody who had spring break last week had a great time. And also for the people who were locked in by snow, and it looks like you'll be locked in again this week with those nor'easters coming through there. I hope everybody's doing good and safe and comfortable and have their backup generator. That's good. With that, today I don't actually have a demonstration, so it's going to be more Q&A. So please, now is your opportunity. Jump on to the GoToWebinar control panel, go to the questions section, enter your questions there, and Dave will be reviewing those as we go through the system here. A couple quick announcements as we've been talking about. We're looking for mentors to help us out. We have an enormous amount of incoming business, and we have more and more developers who are needing both mentoring and small project work and things like that. And we're trying to find those really good developers who have the bandwidth to be able to help us out and make that happen. So just contact us. You can send your information to guides, that's Guides, at alphasoftware.com. And we can review it, get in touch with you. We've already gotten some great submissions and going through that, and the more the merrier. We have an enormous amount of business coming down the road, and we're very, very excited. As we've been talking about, we have coming up, you'll be amazed that it's going to be here sooner than later. You'll be like October, we're already into football season. In fact, it's so scary. I have kids, and we're like a month and a half, 2 months from summer break, so it's just going crazy fast this year. So we have DevCon coming up in October. You can go on to our alphasoftware.com website, register there, see the venue. We're going to be at an amazing venue down in the near the Disney resort areas. So it's fabulous if you have a family. It's a great way to kind of kill two birds with one stone. And we also have a very tight, very focused set of sessions, including a new special session we announced. And also, I'm going to pop over here real quick. We've just announced that we are now taking reservations for the Doctor is In, which allows you to meet face-to-face with an alpha engineer, someone who's an expert in their area. And it's a complimentary 30-minute meeting. And I think you'll find it very valuable. We find that people walk away with that as one of the most popular aspects of our developers convention. And so if you haven't received this email, go ahead and check it out. You can contact us at guides at Alpha Software. If you have, go ahead and reserve your spot because they're going to go very, very fast. And you'll need to be registered for the DevCon before you reserve the spot, but please do that, and it's assigned on a first come, first served basis. We really enjoy that, both from the standpoint of what we see it does for our developers, but developers get, we get a lot out of spending time with them, finding out what their challenges, what they're trying to do, and what they're working on from that standpoint there. So we have DevCon coming up, a lot of exciting stuff there, and also the new Meet the Doctor sessions are now available within the system. So I don't have a demonstration today, but I wanted to lay the groundwork for what we're going to be starting very, very soon. And I mentioned it before, but it's a new DevOps series. And the reason I call it DevOps is that it's, it's around that. It's not the actual act of programming or coding or building it, but it's all the other pieces that go around it that allow you to become really, really efficient. And we've been having a really good series on that in terms of you have a developer cycle where you plan, code, build, and test, and then you release it, and then you have the ops. So we've talked a lot about the different elements of it, things like source control and the monitoring capabilities of both Alpha Cloud and also our standalone server. But I want to focus a little bit on this area right here, which, to be honest, sometimes kind of gets left to the end. And the better we can get in that area, the more. So we're creating a new series here that's going to be about testing. The focus of this is how do you implement test strategies with Alpha Anywhere. Now, some of these topics are not going to be just Alpha Anywhere specific, meaning that they're more generic testing discussions and talk, but a lot of it will be then how do we plug in the Alpha Anywhere architecture into that testing metaphor. So we're going to actually cover 4 different areas in our testing series. And again, this is going to start, my goal is to start it next week as we go through it. First is how do you structure your app, whether it's mobile, web, etc., for testing? How do you put it together so that it's easier to create a quality testing environment using Alpha Anywhere? Then we're going to go into web app testing, mobile app testing, and build process. So as I mentioned, the first one is how do you structure your application? Second one is, well, okay, now I've got a web app. How do I test that web app? And what are the kind of techniques and tools I can use to do that? So we're going to do some demonstrations around that. Then we're going to move into the mobile app area because we're doing, most of our developers are developing both web and mobile aspects. So now, well, how do I test my mobile app? Because that's kind of a different animal from the web app. And what are the steps you can go through to test that, especially when you have a dependency on the hardware, such as using PhoneGap for your build kind of scenario there. And we're going to talk about a number of the different tools you can use and services that are available to help you do that. And last but not least is talk about the build process. The build process is I've made some changes. I want to get it up on the server, get it tested, move it through the process. Well, there's some really cool things that are happening in the industry that we can start taking advantage of it to help this overall process to make test not kind of just we need to do a one-time test, but make test actually part of your overall build process so it's continually being done and it's continually being handled. And so we're going to be talking about that. So we're very excited about that testing series. We're going to be starting that. My goal is next week with the first aspects there. We're obviously looking for any input. Like if you think, oh, you know what, this would be cool in the testing series, please send that to us at guides@alphasoftware.com. So I have an agenda I put together, but obviously we are very focused on listening to our developer community, and we need from you any feedback. So if there's something about testing you've always had a question about, a thought about, make sure to send that to us so that we have time to build it into the curriculum and build it into the presentations so that we can answer those questions while we're going through the information that we have. And if we don't know, we can find it out ahead of time instead of reacting. We can be proactive. And you can do that again by sending it to guides@alphasoftware.com. That's kind of the catch-all place to go to send us requests, questions, comments, feedback, whatever you need. We are always listening at that address. So as I said before, don't really have a big demonstration. We are prepping some other demonstrations that will kind of intersperse with that. Also, Sarah's has a bunch of new documentation things that are being worked on that we're going to be able to share very shortly. And we have a new release kind of percolating, coming out in the near future. And when that comes out, we have a lot of content there. So a lot of very busy things going on, both at Alpha in the development environment, our development community, but in our marketing department. And Transform continues to move ahead very quickly. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about some of the new features and capabilities, and also more importantly, some of the programs we have to help people take advantage of Transform and add it into their toolkit to help them deploy and build very powerful solutions, both with Alpha Anywhere and Transform. And we're getting a huge amount of interest in it because that really solves a key problem in terms of making it easy to create data collection systems without being a programmer. But what we're finding is that you really have a classic, you've got chocolate in my peanut butter and you've got peanut butter in my chocolate situation with Alpha Anywhere and Transform, because they both do certain things very, very well. But if you combine them, you can do truly amazing things. So we're looking forward to showing you more about that, show you more of the integration, the other pieces, and it's just very exciting, very, very fun there. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Dave, for I'm sure there are lots and lots of questions, and we will do our best to try and answer those questions through our process here. And remember, you can always send in questions ahead of time at guides@alphasoftware.com so we can be prepared for future questions that, prepare them before our meetings and our presentations.
Fantastic. So I don't know how familiar you are recently with ViewBox control, or whether that's one.
I've been doing a lot of playing with it. Actually, that's going to become my go-to control in the very near future.
We have two questions from two different people about ViewBox controls.
Dynamite, good.
Both of them are mentioning them in relationship to ViewBox controls being used for reporting reasons.
Oh, good.
I need to adjust let me just adjust my audio here for a second. Okay.
Yep.
So let me start with the first question. The first question was that there's a video that someone did which showed how to print nicely styled reports from a ViewBox. What they'd like to know is, can I filter the results at runtime using this method?
I'd have to double check that method.
Okay.
Now, the answer is absolutely. A ViewBox is in the data controls because it's a data-driven. So for people who are not as familiar, I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to put in a ViewBox and kind of walk you through a little bit about a ViewBox to talk about it. So you have a ViewBox here, and it's very similar to list control. In fact, it has a lot of the same DNA, but it's a much lighter weight control. And that's an important thing to understand about a ViewBox, is that it doesn't have all the power of a list control, meaning it doesn't handle all the data synchronization and editing and other things that a list control does. So if you're doing more of a presentation of information, your ViewBox is the way to go, because it's very lightweight, it's very fast, and it's very flexible in terms of being able to use it. So I'm going to just go ahead and load a sample one here. And as you can see, we have a whole bunch of sample ones built in, and they're great for being able to see this thing. So I'm going to grab this one right here called List of Names using a freeform layout template. And so we've loaded that in, and it's already set up all of my different elements here. Now, the important thing about a ViewBox that is critical is that ViewBoxes take two key forms. One is HTML, which is just static HTML. So if you wanted just to put some static HTML on a UX and have it presented there, then you could use that. And it's static, meaning that there's no variability. Once you create it, it's there. But the cool thing about a ViewBox, which is very powerful, is that it can merge a template with data. So in this case, this is a data template. Merge it. In my case, I'm just getting some static JSON. So I'm just putting in some static JSON here of some names and addresses. What's great about this is that you can use a list control to populate a ViewBox, which I will show you in a few moments. You can use a JavaScript function, a database query. So there's a lot of very good ways you can connect to data and then merge that data. So what the individual is talking about is that, hey, I've got some data on my local system and I want to be able to filter it and then show that. So let's go ahead and do a couple quick things real quick. So first, I want to show you a little bit more about the ViewBox. So you'll see that it's identified what are my fields. So I have a series of different fields that's in my database. And then if I go to my layout, you'll see that my layout is just plain HTML. And you'll see in the layout, you'll have field holders, which are from my fields that are in there. So again, very similar to list control from that. And now I can do a preview. I don't know if the preview works on here. Yep. So you'll see it's got a nice little preview. And essentially, it's kind of created a list control where you have each record is essentially an item here. And if I need to change that, I just go in here and let's say, last name. And I'm just going to go here and put first name. So I'm just editing my there, and I can go into my preview and you'll see, hey, last name, first name. And since it's it's done with HTML, I can sit there and say, I'm going to make this bolded. So I'm going to make this title bolded, and then I'm going to unbold it. And then I'm going to go back to my preview, and now you'll notice the last name is bolded. So everything's done there. And one of the cool things about this that I like to tell people is that we aren't all experts at everything. So what's nice about it is that you can work with a third-party CSS HTML person that can help put this together for you, and then you can make it live by just integrating the live data from there. But let's take this out. I'm going to do a little quick example real quick. I'm going to get rid of that real quick. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a list control on here. And I'm going to go list of customers. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to use the quick setup gene because I just want to go in. I'm going to connect it to my database. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to customer. And I'm just going to pick a few codes here. Let's just do a few codes here. Okay. And then I'll go to my layout and I'll just put these layout items right here. Yeah, nothing's really sample there. So let's go VB ViewBox demo. Okay. And so now you'll see in my working preview that I have a standard list control that's just pulling back all the data in there. And the neat thing about this is this could be offline, which is really powerful, meaning that I could go through here and put it from the standpoint of I can persist that data locally. So the view boxes are very powerful when you talk about pulling data offline and having it available disconnected. You know, you can have a list that's offline, then do that. So I'm going to create now a view box in here, and I'll go VB customer. So what I want to do is I want to present the data in the list of customers into the VD customer, or into this view box. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into my view box and I'm going to say, okay, what kind of data source am I using for it? So I'm going to click and say data because I want to grab data. The list data source, it could be JavaScript to database query. So I don't even need a list of customers, but in this case I'm doing it all off a list. I'm going to pick list and I'm going to point it to list of customers. So now my view box is linked to this customer list. So it looks at that for the information. So now when I click fields, you'll notice that, oh, it knows that in my list of customers, I've got things like customer code, ID, company name, and contact title. So now I can go to the view box layout. I can go in here and add it in items. So I could either do it free form, where I can just say, okay, insert a field and just put like the company name there. And you'll notice it puts the little curly brackets. So if I had some standard HTML, I could just make that HTML quote unquote live. But we can also use the Genie, which is a little more powerful, which allows me to go in here and say, okay, I'm going to put in data controls and I'm going to put in that customer code. And so now you have more of a kind of a, when you're building a UX, and when I do that, you'll notice, oops, preview it. I think it's my version here, but let's go ahead and do this here. You'll see that, why is that not showing? Wait a second, did I not put that in there? Let's go in there, label, customer code. So much for that. Let's go here, the view box layout. Actually, I'm just going to do freeform for right now. Let's try this. Oh, I think I have to do refresh, and then I have to button here. Hold on a second here. And I'm just going to add a refresh view box. Refresh data. And I've got to point at the right one. So I'll go in here. Sorry for the little delay there. So I'll select here and then click up. There it is. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what it is, the view box wasn't refreshed on that. Now you'll notice something in here that it's basically, and let me go back and change my view box right here. Okay. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay. So I'll click, so I've got my list control here, and then down here is my view box, which hasn't been displayed. But now when I click this, you'll notice that it grabbed the data in my list box, merged it into the view box. And in my case, I just have the customer name over, or the customer code over and over and over again. Now, the cool thing about that is I could go in here to this list of customers, go to list properties. I'm going to add a search part. And in my search part, I'm going to go ahead and add a, let's go ahead and go here, and I'm going to create for my list parts, click OK, target there, okay. Oh, nope, we got to go here. Sorry, I'm running around a little bit there, but okay, so what I did is I basically went in and added a search part to my list. So now I can go into my list, and in a moment, then let's say I go in here and go Alpha key. I have to create the button too. Sorry. Not very well thought out demo here, so let me go ahead and just add buttons. Put those right here. Okay. Notice I didn't have to create all this lot, what the code and customer did it all for me. So I'll go in here, go here to customer code Alpha key. I'm going to click search. Should be surfing. Is that? Why is my search not going? My demo's not working good today. Is it not set up properly? Hold on a second. Well, I apologize, but the idea behind it is that depending upon the value of in my list, I can then update my ViewBox. So the original question is that, okay, I've got a ViewBox and I want to filter that ViewBox based on other data. I can do that either through a query back to the backend database. I can connect it to a list that's been filtered, and it will only show those items. So let me go ahead and show you an example, kind of hard-coded, but I'm just going to go here and I'm going to say my SQL statement. I'm going to say filter where customer code is equal to Alpha key, and I can execute that. And we'll put that like that. Okay. So now I've filtered my list here, and watch what I do when I update my ViewBox. You're going to notice that it only is showing what's in my filtered list. So before I was trying to do a client side and I must have done something wrong, so I apologize there. But the idea is that you can have offline, you can have a list control, and then in that list control, you can have a whole set of data, and it can be persisted locally. And then what you can do is have a ViewBox that's connected to that list box that is essentially kind of like the detail, where then based on what's in here, it's going to show here. So you can filter that list control to only the item you want, refresh the ViewBox, and then you'll be able to see that. And then what it will do is it will refresh it. So like, oh, okay, you know what? I kind of want to make this ViewBox look a little more interesting. So now I'm going to go back into that ViewBox. I'm going to go here, and after the customer code, I'm going to go ahead and insert a field, and it's going to be the company name. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to insert another field. It's going to be the contact title. Okay. Now I save that and I do a working preview. Okay. Notice it's still filtered because I hard coded that filter. But when I do this, you'll notice now it presents this data using that template. And this can be any kind of HTML. So you can use very nice looking CSS to make it look gorgeous, which is a big benefit, is that it makes it very easy for you to create essentially live HTML. So in terms of the person who answered it, the idea is you link it to either, if it's an offline app, you want to use a list and then do the filter the list and then refresh the ViewBox, and that will just show that one record with the information. Then you can do the reporting from there. The other option beyond that is you could do some, and also, by the way, I'm not limited to one record. I could set it up so this iterates over. So these could be 3 records, and this would iterate over it 3 times to show you the 3 templates over and over again. So you can do things like that. The other option, by the way, just to let you know, is when you're in your ViewBox, if you are connected, the data source can be actually a database query. And in here, which is really powerful, is that you can do things like arguments. So you could pass arguments into that query. So you can say, okay, pull the data from the database, but query it on this, set these arguments, do the filter on that, and then after it's done that, refresh your ViewBox, and then after they've queried the data from the data in the back-end system, it will do that. And that's really, really powerful in terms of the ability to create these sort of really nice presentations. Now realize the ViewBox is kind of read-only. It's meant to allow you to pull data and display it to the user. and that can be in either text or other theses there. If you're doing editing of data, you're really going to need to use the list and the detail view because it handles all that editing, updates, and everything else for you. So that's a quick introduction. I hope that kind of helped the individual, but basically all you need to do, let me get out of here without saving. Basically, you just need to filter the data that goes to the view box, and then in that, it will then just show the filtered data, and you're able to do that with there. So you can create essentially like I want to create a report based on a subset of data in my data, then I want to show a nice on the print and then be able to print it out from that standpoint there.
Well, that's great. And the person who actually asked the question said, yes, you pointed me in the right direction. So that's
Oh, good, good. I know it was a little bit meandering. And
we had some actual similar questions that came up while you're doing that, and
oh,
I
cool.
think they've been addressed, but I'm just going to read it again to make sure that we totally got it since people took the time to ask the question. And it says, is there any way to base a ViewBox on a SQL stored procedure where an argument is passed to the stored procedure to get the record set?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so when you do, I'm going to go back in this feedback. I'm going to go to data source. I'm going to change it to SQL. Okay. You'll notice that I have two ways. When I define my SQL, I define my connection string. I have two ways to do this. I can either select a list of fields, which will show me table name and field list, or I can create custom. And now in this SQL statement, let me go ahead and grab my connection. In here, I can actually do exec SP, 1, 2, 3, and then pass it arguments, arg1, comma, arg2. So Alpha, when you're using the custom SQL statement, you can pass it in a SQL statement that actually executes a stored procedure, and then you can pass in the arguments, much like you would use them in any kind of query that you've defined here, into that stored procedure. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take those arguments, it's going to emit it down to the database is going to bring that data back, and then it will automatically update the HTML in that view box to show it. So absolutely you can do that. The trick is, instead of using, let me go ahead and cancel out of this here. Instead of using select a list of fields, you'll use custom and do that. And there's a number of videos that are on there that show you how to set up because it works the same way with both the list control and the grid. They all can connect to stored procedures. You can use that to query your data and bring that down to the local system for display viewing the view box.
Terrific. Thank you. While we're talking about databases, we do have a database question. And
Excellent.
The question is there, and actually it's two questions rolled into one, you'll see. Is there an easy way in Alpha to compare fields in one table to many rows in another table and get a percentage of the fields that match in each row comparison? So that's the first part of the question. But the second part of the question is, or is this better done on the database side?
On the database side.
Yep.
And Alpha does have, if you go to the control panel, Alpha still has, what are they called? Operations, I think here.
Operations, although they tend not to be web safe. So
yeah, they're really oriented around DBF files. So the reality is you're going to need to stick to the database thing. Now, a couple hints on that is there's tons of documentation out there. Option 2 is go on to Fiverr or Upwork and hire someone to write that little query, because there are some brilliant SQL people that know all these cool tricks to do that kind of stuff, and they can really reduce it down to a single SQL query, like with a multiple join and a little secret union merge kind of join or something like that. So if you're not super strong, check out, there's Upwork, but also Fiverr is really nice. Like you can, and I don't get paid by these guys, but I use them all the time, especially for graphic stuff. But you can go in here and you can just type in SQL query. And Fiverr's nice because they're very aggressive, and it's like point stuff. I just need this little thing. Watch, this guy for $10, Velocity, will write a query for you. And as you can see, they can be very complex, kind of queries. And I got to tell you, versus you spending maybe you know, 2 hours, 3 hours trying to figure that out, you can hire this person, and in a very short period of time, within a day, for $10, you can have your query. And all you have to do is give them the tables, give them the requirement, and they're very smart. And this is just one guy here, but there are tons of people out there. As you can see, there's probably 100 gigs that are 230, let's see how many, 228 gigs that are available. And that includes things like you can do like optimize queries, which is nice too if things are running slow. But also you can have someone in and they can do stored procedures. So they can actually write stored procedures for you and do things like that. And obviously the more extensive, the more expensive it is. But, don't beat your head against the wall. If it's something really, if you're not a super, and I'm not a super, I've learned it, but I'm not a super SQL guy. If I've got a complex query, I'll go on and try and find someone who's an expert. And as long as the data is not, you got to be a little careful. You don't want to give them, social security numbers and stuff like that. But you can usually give them 2 dummy tables that have basically what you want, and they can put it together in a matter of an hour because they know how to write these queries and they can do them very efficiently. So I would keep it in the database, and I would definitely, if you're not super strong, don't want to struggle against doing that, you can usually find someone who can help you out pretty good. And once you've done a gig or two with these people and they know who you are, you can just reorder and they, I need it tweaked this way, and boom, an hour later you get it, resolved. They're really good and good people.
Yeah, we do that. Yeah. We do that here with small jobs all the time. The service we tend to use though is Upwork. I've used Fiverr, but
yes, Upwork's the other one.
And I've done someone who's really good at one specific thing, and you can just ping them and generally get something turned around that same day, which could be a huge time saver when they've built up the expertise in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I've got a bunch of other ones here.
Bingo.
Now this is
good. People woke up.
I think they did. There's still room for more though. Please type in your questions. We'd love to get to them. Okay, so this person has they have a single the Alpha Anywhere developer, and they've built an application and they've tested it and they're ready to deploy it, and it's going to be both a mobile app and a web application. So the question is, and this is also partially a sales question as much as a technical question, is what do I actually need to purchase to do this? Do I need an Alpha server? What are my options when it comes time to deployment?
Good question. You have really 2 key options now. One is you'll definitely need the Alpha server, and you can either license the server and install it on your own machine, or work with a company like ZebraHost who can host it for you. They take care of all the hosting and it's managed hosting, etc. Or option 2 is Alpha Cloud, which is a service which includes the license. So it's more of a subscription model. So the Alpha license, you purchase it as I've got a license to this application server, and then you can install that where you need to install it on your own machine, or a ZebraHost or wherever you want to do that. And then the other option is Alpha Cloud, which allows you to purchase a subscription. And the nice thing is you don't have to install anything or anything else. You just go to Alpha Cloud, and then you can publish it to an Alpha Cloud instance, your subscription on there, and then and it includes the license for the software. So it's more of a all-in-one, hosting and say. And again, Alpha Cloud has a lot of benefits in terms of it's built on top of AWS. It has a lot of reliability, performance, and other things along those lines. But either way is perfectly okay for you. You can either do it yourself with an Alpha application license, work with a third party like ZebraHost who has a lot of experience getting all that installed and set up, or you can go Alpha Cloud, which allows you to then just buy the subscription, and then boom, you can start publishing right to that. So any of those are the way to go from that standpoint. You can, the Alpha development environment has a app server involved with it. So if you're doing your initial testing, but it's very limited and it's really not meant for any production, but just want to let you know you can do that, where you can kind of treat your little development machine as like a server for a little bit. Like especially when you're developing and testing out your mobile app, you can kind of run it against your development server or your development machine as essentially quote unquote a server. But when you're ready to really go out and expose it to the world, then you're going to need to do the Alpha license.
Mm-hmm. Now there are 2 different types of application server licenses, correct? There's the
that
Alpha
is correct
standalone, and there's the Alpha Anywhere application server for IIS. And perhaps you could mention some of the differences between the two and why you might want one over the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as he said, there's two flavors. One is the standalone server. And basically what this is, you have any Windows box, a Windows VPS, you install it on there, and then it's a combination of the web server and the application server all wrapped in one. And that's the one we've had for some time now. And it basically, you put it on a machine, you open up the port for like port 80, and then people can access it through there. The other option is the Alpha Anywhere for IIS plugin, and that is where it actually is a plugin into IIS. So you already need an IIS server instance running, and then we install into there. And there's some nice little benefits for the IIS one. One is that it uses the complete IIS infrastructure for security and other aspects there. It also has some performance tuning advantages in terms of things that IIS do, like, spinning up cores and doing other things like that for you. IIS does a little bit more of that. And if you have an environment where you're already using IIS, it's easy for your IT staff to manage and to install it and manage your system from within there. There are two flavors. There are different costs for that because IIS has a lot more capabilities, features that are there, so you can talk to a salesperson to find out a little bit more of the difference between them. But those are the two options that you can do, is either standalone or IIS as a plugin there.
That's great, thank you. There's also a follow-up question, and they ask, does this include PhoneGap? You said, which they assume is used to deploy the application. Can you talk a little bit about what they need for PhoneGap?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So with PhoneGap, you can go one of two ways. One is the easier way, is you can go to build.phonegap.com. Let me go ahead and pull that up real quick. And basically, it's offered by Adobe. It is a service that allows you to build your app. They actually have a one app for free, and basically allows you to come out. And all this is really just a compiler in the cloud. So what we do is when Alpha says we want to wrap this into PhoneGap, it basically grabs all your information, sends it up to a PhoneGap build, and you have an account number and name, etc. Builds it, and then you can download the APK, IPK, and other pieces there. And the nice thing is they're doing all the maintenance of that and everything else. You could, if you wanted to, install the Cordova libraries, which allow you to build it on your local machine. And then in here, there's an option to save it out as a set of files so you can do it locally. So some of our clients have already existing environments for building PhoneGap apps, or using the Cordova libraries, so they can build it on their local machine. So they basically use Alpha, spit the stuff out into a folder, then run it locally. But the easier way is to do that. Now, PhoneGap Build is you get one app for free, but they have a paid plan, and you can get up to 25 apps for like $10 a month. So it's very, very inexpensive. And the other thing about it is that app, once you've built your app and deployed it, you don't actually need it on PhoneGap Build anymore. You can delete it and then put a new app on there. So you don't have to keep doing it. Now, reality is you'll probably have 3 or 4 in process. You want to keep them up to date, blah, blah, blah. You'll do that. But what an app on a PhoneGap Build means is that an app that you are in the process of compiling and building on an ongoing basis. Once you're done, like I'll do demonstrations or prototypes, I'll delete those off of PhoneGap, and now I have a new slot. I can do a new project and upload a new one from there. So that's PhoneGap Build. So there is a small price to it, but it's very inexpensive, and it handles it. Nice thing about PhoneGap Build is they continually update all the most current libraries, and it's sort of like outsourcing all the DevOps stuff. It really takes a lot of the work out of it, because they do a lot of that installation of the current compilers and bug fixes and other things to make sure that your experience is very, very clean and simple.
Right. So to sort of summarize, you'll need, when it's time to deploy, you're going to need a server, which could either be the Alpha Anywhere server, the standalone one, or the Alpha Anywhere server for IIS, which costs a bit more but has a lot of features and better throughput. Or alternatively, you can go to Alpha Cloud for hosting the application, in which case we provide the server for you. And then on top of that, you'll also probably want a full PhoneGap build account. So just keep that in mind. But with those two things, you're pretty much up and running. Obviously, if you do get the server, you're going to need to host that yourself someplace or go to a third-party hosting service like ZebraHost or GoDaddy or one of those and install it there. But that's pretty much all there is to it going forward. Let me see. I've got a couple other good questions. Oh, here's a good one. A little bit different than what we've handled so far. And this one is this person is trying to set up security permissions for multiple users, and some of the users are going to have full CRUD permissions, so they're able to change and write data and delete data. Some are only going to have read-only permissions, right? And this person wants to create a list in a UX control with a detail view and have some users be allowed to make changes and some users not be allowed to make changes. So the question is, can you do this in one UX control, or should you make two UX controls, one with the full CRUD, read, write, update permissions, and one with the read-only, or can you combine it into one and have it be smart?
I would combine it into one and have it be smart, just to make your life simpler. So let's go in here and look at this. I think I have one already set up with okay, so I have a list, and this isn't a mobile, so it's all, oh, it is, never mind. Okay, so you can see I've got a list control here, and in here I can go, these are editable item there. Now, what's nice about that is that you can control whether things are editable within here using the security groups functionality. So every field can be on a field label be set for security groups. Now it's going to say not active for me because it's not active in here. But if it was active, what it would do is it would show a list of my groups in my security, and I could say, okay, who gets to edit this field? So that allows them to be editable or not editable. Now that said, another method is available is you can actually surround a group of things with a container. So I can actually say, okay, these items everybody can see, but these are maybe the manager items. So now with this container, I can go in here and I can set it, and depending on whether or not I'm active, I can edit, or I'll be able to see, it's actually visibility, excuse me. I'll be able to see visible these units right here. So if you wanted someone who's a user to see only these, but then a manager see all of these, then I would set it up with a container and then use security groups here to then define who gets access to those fields. Now, if you are wanting to do something a little bit more sophisticated, where you wanted to make this a editable or like enabled or disabled, the way I would do that is I would add a hidden field in here, and I'd maybe call it group, okay? And then in my field here, I can go to the enable or read-only expression. You can use one or the other, and you can say group is equal to manager. Okay. So what that means is that if this field has the word manager in it, which is what it is, then it'll allow you to edit there. Now the trick here is that, well, how do I get the membership group to be in here? Okay. Actually, let me go, oops. Let me go back here. I screwed that up. I think you'd have to put in double quotes because it translates it. It's this. Oh, it's between JavaScript and there. Okay, here, let's go. Insert field group is equal to
Wait, is this JavaScript where you need to have it equals?
Well.
Equals single quote?
No, it's that. So that's bizarre. Maybe that's a reserved word or something like that.
Yeah.
Let me try this. Let's go. I'm going to just change this name of this in case it's a revert. Member. Okay. Okay, and then I'll go here to amount, and I'll go down here to the enable. Insert field, group membership is equal to. There we go. Group must be a reserved work of some kind.
Okay.
Yeah, of course I had to pick that. Now, here's the trick. Well, how do I get my group in there? Well, the cool thing about that is in my server side on dialog initialize, I can do the following. I can say context.security.getRole, or first I'll say current user is equal to context.security.getCurrentUser. Okay, so this is a built-in function that grabs who the current person is, their user ID, and puts it there. Then I can go in here and I can say e.control.groupMembership. I'm going to set the value of that is equal to context.security.getRoles and current user. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm finding out who is the person using this UX. Then what I'm doing is I'm saying use this other function to get what that person's current roles are. And that's going to set the value of that field. Now, once that value is set when it runs, then this will automatically just look at that and say, oh, does it match that criteria kind of thing there. So that is kind of how I would approach it from there. Now, realize that this is kind of an online thing, meaning that these functions are server functions. If you're going to do it offline, what I usually do is when the UX, when I first open up and log in on my mobile device, I have hidden fields on my, that I set that kind of information about that user. And then I can use the same technique of using show and hide, enable, etc., to do that within there with some secret information behind the scenes. So if you're online, you can just go to the server side, put in this little quick script, find out who it is, and then be able to update things, you know, as needed based on that information. And so this is an alternative. If you notice, when I went here and I did group membership, security groups, this actually says whether this is shown or hide. But if I want one where it's enable, disable, I have to do a little bit more work in the system to get that. Basically, I have to grab that, put it in a hidden field, and then set the enable or, you know, the read only based on that. So that's how I would approach that problem there. Now you can have a single item or a single UX form that kind of behaves differently by basically who's using it. And takes a little bit, but not much. As you can see, only a few lines of code to do that.
Great. Now, person pointed out that they'd used field level security, but they found that it actually made the whole thing disappear.
Yes.
Is that happen with enable expression versus read-only expression? Can you maybe explain what the difference are between those two properties there?
Okay, yeah, so the group membership, agreed, is visibility or not. So it's a visibility factor. Do I want to show this stuff or not show this stuff? Enable is basically said, will the control be enabled? So in the case of a mount, which is a text box, can you type into the text box? And this one is a little different. I don't know the real big difference between the two, read-only and enable. So I'd have to do a lookup on that. And maybe Sarah can help us out in terms of the difference between the two of them. So you can try one, and if it doesn't work, the other one there. The difference is that if you say like read-only, then this field will still be shown, but you won't be able to change the contents of that field. And so that's your go-to, is that read-only. Enable, I believe what it is more of along the lines of you've got like checkboxes or radio buttons. Do you enable that control so they can change it? And so you can play a little bit between the two of them. I don't know how exactly the difference between the two, so I have to do a little research there. But that's an alternative versus the security, which is show hide, is basically visibility. Now you can continue to show that field, but make it say read only, so the person can't modify the contents of that field based upon who they are. And you can mix and match the two. You know, if you have a set of fields that you say only managers can see, then you can use security groups. That's easy, double click. The other one, you can set up this method and do it from there.
Excellent. So a moment ago, you were showing us some Xbasic in which you were getting the current user roles, and you were using the context object, and that actually raised a couple questions among a couple people here.
Yes.
One of which was, how did you even know about the context object? What does it do?
Okay.
And how
Very
would I
good
find
point.
out how to do it? Yeah.
I always go there. Okay, very good point. And a very, very critical one too is that in version 11, oops, got to report that. There it goes. Okay. Oh, that's a different kind of context. Okay. So what context is think of it as like a server-side master variable. Now, in V11 with Alpha, we introduced at that time frame the IIS server. And the IIS server worked differently than the standalone one because it was built on a more broad architecture. And so what we found is that certain things you could do with the standalone server from a security standpoint, et cetera, didn't work with and also session variables and other things. Here's an example of that, is that with the standalone server, when you had session variables, those were called in memory. So basically what happened is when you logged in, it created a scratch pad of like session variables that then you could refer to in your code while the person was logged in. Now, when you go to IIS, they have a really cool function. That function is IIS will automatically take your session variables and store them in a database. And the important thing about that is that if you had 2 or 3 IIS servers running your application and you were bouncing around between them like a server farm, then all of them could call back into that database to get your session data so that literally you could move a person from one server to another. But that broke with our traditional method. So we introduced and we started to recommend highly that you use the context object. And the context object, again, is server stuff. So there's the security session, there's context session, context.security, context.session. So if I go into contact.security, and they must be doing some updates here, you'll see that there's all these different methods. Things like adding a user to a role, changing password, create a role, but most importantly is get roles, like that get roles one right here. And so this is that way to get the role. So what it does is that this gets a list of all roles for what's available in your application at that one in time there. So the context, and we highly recommend when you build, use the context object for things like security and session variables. Like the most important one for context is you just say context.session.add, the name of the variable and the value. This is instead of session.this. So you can mix and match them there, but we highly recommend you start using the context object. And the primary reason around that is that then you know your app is going to work perfectly on the standalone server, on IIS, and more importantly, on Alpha Cloud. So that's a way to go there. And there were a lot of notices when we switched over there. You can still use things like session dot to do that, but we really recommend, we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes to make your life easier, but check out the context object. But you'll find that in Alpha, and I'll go ahead and take this, and I'll go ahead and put it into
Before you do that, the proper way to share is actually with a share button. And the reason we use the share button, the put up there, is because in case we ever change the architecture of this page, the URL may change, but this is the permalink.
The
permalink.
I learned something new today.
Yes, excellent.
There you go. So I put that in there, and you can read more about it. And there's huge amount of very powerful items, and the neat thing is once you start going over to context and you use that, then you know your kind of future point. If you say, oh, you know what, I want to move my standalone app and put it up on Alpha Cloud because I'm getting so much demand, you'll feel comfortable that everything you've developed, especially around security, is going to work perfect, and you're not going to have any weirdness or changes or anything like that. Because by the way, Alpha Cloud is built on top of the IIS server. So when you do an Alpha Cloud, it actually spins up 2 IIS servers for you and takes care of things for you and handles those kind of pieces for you. Pretty nice from that standpoint.
Excellent.
Good question.
So a question still on the same topic about the context variable. Someone pointed out before that you were using context.security.getRoles, right? Well, getRoles implies that maybe there's more than one, right? So saying equals manager probably wouldn't be the correct. I know you were just doing pseudocode, but
let's find out here. Let's see. You know what? It's GetUserRoles here.
GetUserRoles.
So yeah, good catch. What I'd be doing is
it looks like a CRLF. Okay.
There you go. Yep.
Okay. It's
Good
not
catch.
just that though. It's also doesn't get user roles bring back a list. Could you have
Yes.
multiple roles? You could be an admin and so on. So the question would be, if it does bring back a list, what do you do in Xbasic
Ah,
when you're trying to find something in a list? Like,
yep.
let's say manager is one of the roles, but it might be the third thing listed.
Any.
Gotcha.
This is a great little powerful built-in. It's been around forever.
Yeah.
So what this any function is, star ANY, it basically says take any piece of text like manager, and I keep jumping back and forth, comma, and I'm going to, let's see, let's just put this down here somewhere. I'm going to say current user roles, and I'll go right here, and I'll go here. So I can say if, and they have manager in their list of roles. So basically this is a true false. So it says look up in this variable the word manager. If it's in there, if that text is in there, then go ahead and do something. If not, they are not. So I use that any a lot because it's a very simple, fast, and it basically just says, is one piece of text in another? Now, it does anything like look at white space or anything else. There's other more powerful search tools like regex and things like, so you can do regex kind of expressions. But if you're doing a quick and dirty, just is this in this, that's your way to go, because then it just happens. It's also resolves to a true false. So they're easy to use in if kind of commands.
Excellent. We have yet another question about source control. That has been a popular.
I know, isn't it? And it's hugely valuable.
Yeah, and we've done sessions that have been devoted just to source control as part of your DevOps series. You can find those in our video library at videos.alphasoftware.com. But just in a nutshell, can you sort of summarize how Alpha Anywhere and maybe something like a GitHub might work together in the last 3 minutes?
Yep. So in our DevOps series, we talked about it, is that basically, let me try and find a good picture of this stuff where we have it. We'll start with here. So the idea behind this is that source control is basically tracks files and changes to files. So the newer generation, things like Git and Subversion, is called distributed because each person can have their own set of files. In the old days, you had one like master folder everybody kind of interacted with. But the problem is you might be offline. You might not have access to it. So modern source control allows you to have your own little kind of repository of information locally and then be able to move it back and forth between things. So basically how this works, and I'll go into my environment here. When you build a application, and let me find a good one that I was doing. Let's see, what's a good, I'll just go, I don't have one here. I'd have to go in and check there. But basically Alpha, actually, let me go right here. If we look at this, I'm in the Web Projects Control Panel. I'm going to click this little button right here. You'll see that what that button did was open up the folder where all of my UXs and grids and things like that are at, And in here, what happens is that source control basically creates a little hidden folder, and then you check things in and out of that folder using a user interface. And in my case, I use something called source tree, which is a graphical user interface that makes it easy to manipulate and work with it. You can use a command line if you don't want to. But basically, here are my current set of files. Well, when I submit and check things in, what it does is it creates copies of that and stores them like in a hidden folder. And therefore, if I ever want to bring those back out, I can. Plus, then it knows when those were done, the date, the time, etc. It can compare them against someone else's repository and do sort of correlate between the two of them there. So source control is just, I've got a set of files and I want to manage those files. I want to version them. I want to know when I change it. So for instance, if I go in and edit one of these files, if it's different from the hidden file that the source control is handling for me, then the system will say, hey, you know what, you've got a new file. It's not the same as the old one, and I can handle there. I don't know if I'm being kind of rambling a little bit here. I apologize. But basically, it allows you to control how you do it. Now, you can use it for yourself. So let's say you have a version 1.0 where it's a set system that everything's working great. So you can check it into source control, and boom, now source control has a copy of all those files. Now I can start changing things. And then I can have like a version 1.1, 1.2. The cool thing about source control is that if I ever need to go back to 1.0, I can say, hey, pull back all those 1.0s, and it has a record of all those files. Now, that's if I'm just using it on my own. But now if I'm using it with someone else, they're going to have their set of files, you're going to have your set of files, and it will take care of managing what is the most current set of files and tell who has what. So where I use it a lot is that I'm working with another developer. They're across the world. We're working on the same project. So what we do is, first thing we do is create source control and check all this into it. Then that person pulls down all those files. Now let's say I'm working on one of these files. Let's say I'm editing customer 2 grid, and I make some changes to that grid. And then I save those changes on my local machine, and then I check them into source control. Then what they can do, which is really powerful, is the person on the other side of the world can say, oh, give me a list of any changed files. So they do what's called a fetch, and it tells them, oh, you know what? Customer 2 changed, and usually you put in a description. Now they can pull that down and then put that on their local system. Now, vice versa, if I'm the person who's actually publishing to the server and I have another developer doing some work, they can be changing all these files. They can then submit it to source control. I can bring it down to my local machine so I can pull those most current changes, publish it, and that allows us, instead of emailing things, and more importantly is, let's say I published it and I found out, ruh-roh, they screwed up. When they edited this customer 2_grid, they screwed it up. What I can do is I can go into source control and I can say roll back, pull that old file out from where I checked in last time, put it back in my Active Directory. I can republish, and boom, I now have that file back up on the server and everything working there. So it allows me to coordinate my work. It allows me to create record of my work, and it also allows me to what's called rollback, or you can roll back really quickly to previous versions. You don't have to go, oh, did I make a copy of that last time I sent it up to the server or not? So it helps automate and kind of handles things for you. And I highly recommend you invest in it, because once you get it set up and running, then it does a lot of that homework for you. And especially if you're working with 2 or 3 people, that's the only way to fly, to make sure everything is in control. Because otherwise, do they have the latest files? Are they updated, etc.? And it handles things like, for instance, let's say I change this grid and they change this grid. Well, if I check this in first, it's not going to allow that person to check that file in, because it says, whoa, 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 whoa. Dion put this file in the system. Yours is different. If I do it, I might overwrite his changes. So it kind of forces you to put your stuff on the side, pull mine down, compare them, make the fix, and then check it back in. So it makes sure you don't have that situation where I change something, you change something, and we overrode each other, and then in the end we get a problem. So it does things along those lines. So it's kind of a quick introduction, but I'll tell you, source control, and actually on our roadmap is to build source control check-in, check-out into the IDE, the Alpha development environment, and that's scheduled for a future release.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We're over time by a couple of minutes, so thanks for all of you who stuck with us. Thank you, Dion, very much for presenting, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you, everybody.
And showing up. If you have questions in the meantime, please send them to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. And if you'd like to see a copy of today's recording of the webinar, as well as previous webinars, you can go to videos.alphasoftware.com. Thanks again for attending. We hope to see you next Wednesday. Take care and goodbye.